There's a precise moment when everything shifts. Not with noise, not with drama, not with the big confrontation you've rehearsed 1,000 times in your head. It happens in silence, in a single breath, in one quiet decision that changes the entire energetic landscape between two people. The narcissist's power ends the exact moment the empath stops absorbing their emotional chaos. And what follows isn't what most people expect. It's not revenge. It's not even satisfaction. It's something far more profound. It's the complete collapse of a system that only worked because one person was willing to carry the weight of two souls. When that person finally sets the weight down and walks away, the entire structure crumbles. Not because the empath destroyed it, but because it was never real to begin with. This is the story of what happens spiritually, energetically, emotionally, when an empath stops being the narcissist's emotional landfill, when they stop absorbing the chaos, when they stop translating cruelty into misunderstanding, when they stop making excuses for behavior that needs no translation. It's just toxic. Let me walk you through what actually happens in that sacred, silent moment of detachment, the emotional breakaway, when silence becomes power. Here's what most people don't understand about an empath's departure. It's not loud. There's no door slamming, no final speech, no dramatic exit where they list every wound and wait for acknowledgement that will never come. That's not how awakened empaths leave. They detach quietly, not angrily, just consciously. It starts with a shift so subtle that even the empath might not recognize it at first. They stop trying to fix what's broken. They stop reacting to the bait. They stop explaining themselves to someone who's decided not to understand. There's a moment often in the middle of an ordinary day, during an ordinary conversation, when the empath feels something click into place inside them. It's not hatred. It's not even disappointment anymore. It's clarity. They suddenly see the pattern they've been trapped in, the cycle of chaos and calm, the push and pull, the way they've been dancing to music only they can hear while the narcissist stands still, watching them exhaust themselves. And in that moment of clarity, something inside them says, I don't have to do this anymore. The empath doesn't announce this awakening. They don't send a manifesto or demand a conversation about boundaries. They simply start living differently. They stop absorbing the narcissist's emotional weather. When the storm comes, and it always comes, they no longer stand in the rain trying to hold an umbrella over someone who keeps pushing it away. They step inside. They close the door. They let the narcissist get wet. This is what conscious detachment looks like. It's the empath finally understanding that they're not responsible for another person's emotional regulation. They're not the translator of chaos into peace. They're not the shock absorber between the narcissist and the consequences of their own behavior. The empath begins to pull their energy back, not as punishment, but as self-preservation. Every strand of attention they've poured into that person, every ounce of care they've extended past their own boundaries, every moment they've spent analyzing and accommodating and adjusting themselves, it all starts flowing back to its source, back to them. And this is where the spiritual truth becomes undeniable. What kept that relationship alive wasn't love. It was the empath's energy, their constant giving, their endless patience, their willingness to see potential instead of reality. The moment that energy stops flowing in one direction, the relationship doesn't transform. It reveals itself for what it always was, a one-way street that only functioned because someone was willing to walk it alone. The empath stops chasing, stops explaining, stops defending themselves against accusations designed to confuse rather than communicate. They stop participating in arguments that have no goal except to destabilize. They become what the narcissist fears most, unreachable. Not because they've built walls of anger, but because they've simply stepped into a frequency the narcissist cannot access, the frequency of peace. The narcissist loses their emotional supply when the well runs dry. Now here's where it gets spiritually fascinating. The narcissist built their entire emotional ecosystem around the empath's responsiveness. Every reaction, every tear, every moment of confusion, every apology for things they didn't do that was supply. That was the fuel that kept the narcissist's sense of power intact. And suddenly, that supply is gone. No more validation, no more emotional reactions, no more energy. At first, the narcissist might not even notice. They're so accustomed to the empath being there, absorbing, accommodating, adjusting, that the absence feels like silence before they realize it's actually emptiness. But soon, they start to feel it, the lack, the void, the uncomfortable reality that their tactics aren't working anymore. They send the text designed to provoke guilt. The empath doesn't respond, or responds with something maddeningly neutral. I hope you figure that out. They create drama, expecting the empath to rush in and smooth things over, to take responsibility, to fix what they broke. But the empath doesn't come. They stay where they are, in their own peace, tending to their own garden. This is when the narcissist realizes they've lost something they didn't even know they were dependent on, a source. The empath wasn't just a partner, a friend, or a family member. They were an energy source, a battery, a mirror that reflected the image the narcissist wanted to see. Even when that image was a complete fabrication, the narcissist fed on the empath's care. They fed on the attention, even when it was negative. They fed on the empath's willingness to see the good in them, to believe in their potential, to hold space for their pain. And now, abruptly, the feeding stops. No more emotional banquets. No more someone to blame when things go wrong. No more convenient receptacle for projected shame, anger, and unprocessed trauma. The narcissist is left holding their own emotional garbage, and they don't know what to do with it. They never learned, because there was always someone else willing to carry it for them. What happens spiritually at this moment is profound. The narcissist's false self, the constructed identity built on control and external validation, starts to destabilize. Without the empath's energy propping it up, cracks begin to show. Not because the empath is attacking it, but because it was never structurally sound to begin with. It was always a house of cards, and the empath was the table it sat on. The narcissist doesn't suddenly become self-aware. That's not how this works. Instead, they feel something deeply uncomfortable: irrelevance. The empath's world is continuing without them, and that reality is intolerable, because to a narcissist, being forgotten is worse than being hated, being irrelevant is worse than being opposed. And so they face a choice they've never had to face before: evolve or find a new source. Most choose the latter. They'll go hunting for another empath, another person with a big heart and weak boundaries, someone who hasn't yet learned that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself in them. But something has shifted in the universe. The empath who walked away didn't just free themselves, they altered the pattern. They broke the cycle. And on some level, even the narcissist knows, this one got away. This one learned. This one won't be coming back. The narcissist's confusion when control meets consciousness. This is where it gets almost fascinating to watch, if you can observe from a distance. The narcissist doesn't just lose supply, they lose their sense of reality, because their entire framework for understanding relationships is built on predictability. They know how to manipulate. They know which buttons to push. They've mapped the empath's triggers, learned their weak spots, and designed their attacks accordingly. But now, nothing works. They panic. Not openly, of course. Narcissists don't panic the way other people panic. They don't fall apart visibly. Instead, they escalate. They try everything in their playbook, often in rapid succession, like someone frantically pressing buttons on a remote control that stopped working. First comes the love bombing. Suddenly, they're the person they were at the beginning: attentive, charming, full of promises and apologies. I've changed, they say. I see it now. Give me another chance. The empath, who's been here before, recognizes this for what it is: not change, but strategy. Real change is demonstrated over time, quietly, through consistent action. This is just performance. When love bombing doesn't work, the anger comes. Accusations, blame. Suddenly, Everything that's gone wrong is the empath's fault. The narcissist projects their own abandonment onto the person who simply stopped enabling them. "You're cold," they say. "You're heartless, after everything I've done for you." They try to make the empath feel guilty for having boundaries, as if self-respect is a betrayal. But the empath doesn't engage. They don't defend themselves against false accusations because they've learned something powerful. You can't win an argument with someone who's not interested in the truth. You can't reason with someone who's weaponizing conversation itself. And this non-engagement absolutely baffles the narcissist. They don't understand self-regulated people. They've never had to. Their entire life has been spent around people who react, who absorb, who take responsibility for emotions that aren't theirs. The idea that someone could simply observe their chaos without entering it, could witness their manipulation without being moved by it, it doesn't compute. It's like they're speaking a language the empath has suddenly stopped understanding. Not because the empath can't understand it, but because they've chosen not to. They've changed frequencies. They're operating from a place of centeredness that the narcissist cannot access because they've never developed it. The narcissist might try triangulation, bringing in third parties, creating drama with others, attempting to isolate the empath or damage their reputation. They might spread rumors, play victim, rewrite history in a way that casts them as the wounded party. And some people will believe it. Some people will take their side. But the awakened empath has learned something crucial. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. What matters isn't who believes the narcissist's version of events. What matters is that you're no longer participating in their fiction. The narcissist's confusion deepens because they're encountering something completely foreign to their worldview. A person who has chosen peace over being right, freedom over being understood, self-preservation over external validation. To the narcissist, this looks like coldness, cruelty, and abandonment. They cannot fathom that it's actually the highest form of self-love. And underneath the anger, beneath the manipulation attempts, there's something else: fear. The narcissist is afraid because they're being forced to confront the one truth they've spent their entire life avoiding, that their power was always borrowed. It was never inherent. It only existed because someone gave it to them. And now that person has taken it back. The empaths rise when freedom becomes your frequency. Now let's talk about what's happening to the empath during all of this, because this is where the real transformation occurs. This is where the spiritual mathematics of energy exchange finally balances. The empath feels lighter, calmer, stronger. Not immediately, of course. There's often a period of grief, of withdrawal, of doubting the decision. The empath might feel guilty for setting boundaries, might worry they're being cruel, might second-guess their choice to step away. This is normal. This is the residue of the relationship, the conditioning that taught them their needs were secondary, their pain was dramatic, and their boundaries were selfishness. But as days turn into weeks, as weeks turn into months, something undeniable begins to happen. They start to feel like themselves again. Not the self they were before the relationship, that version is gone, and it should be, but a new self, a wiser self, a self that's been through fire and learned it cannot be burned. Their energy, which has been scattered across someone else's chaos for so long, starts gathering back into their own center. They sleep better, they laugh more easily, they stop checking their phone with anxiety, stop bracing for the next conflict, and stop walking on eggshells in their own life. The empath begins to notice something extraordinary. They have energy for themselves now. Energy to pursue the things they put on hold. Energy to reconnect with friends they drifted from. Energy to remember who they were before they became someone's emotional support system, someone's therapist, someone's scapegoat. And as their frequency rises, as they heal, as they reclaim their power, as they remember their worth, their energy starts attracting healthier people. Not because they're trying to attract anyone, but because like attracts like. When you stop operating from a wound, you stop attracting people who want to poke it. This is the spiritual law the empath is now living. You cannot rise to your highest potential while carrying someone else's lowest vibration. You cannot heal while staying in the environment that wounded you. You cannot become who you're meant to be while playing a role in someone else's dysfunction. The empath discovers that the chaos they thought was love was actually just chaos, that the intensity they mistook for passion was actually just instability, that the person they kept trying to save didn't want to be saved, they wanted an audience for their suffering, a witness to their drama, a scapegoat for their stagnation. But most importantly, the empath learns this. Walking away wasn't giving up on love. It refused to accept counterfeits. Real love doesn't require you to shrink. Real love doesn't drain you dry. Real love doesn't make you question your sanity, apologize for your existence, or sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort. As the empath heals, they often find themselves becoming a beacon for others who are still stuck in similar situations. Their story becomes a roadmap. Their courage becomes permission. Their boundary setting becomes a template, not because they're trying to be an example, but because freedom is contagious. Authenticity is magnetic. Wholeness inspires. The empath realizes they didn't just leave a toxic relationship, they graduated from a level of consciousness they'd outgrown. They alchemized their pain into wisdom. They transformed their empathy from a wound into a gift. They learned the most important boundary of all. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can care without carrying. You can love people from a distance when closeness costs you your peace. And in their rising, they fulfill a prophecy they didn't know they were writing. They become the person they needed when they were breaking. They become living proof that you can survive what almost destroyed you. That you can walk away from what everyone said you couldn't live without and discover you're more alive than you've ever been. The truth, what really happened in the silence. So what actually happens spiritually when an empath stops absorbing a narcissist's pain? The universe rebalances. Energy that was flowing in the wrong direction corrects its course. A soul that was dimming its light to make someone else comfortable finally shines at full brightness. And two people who were entangled in a dance of dysfunction finally separate into their true forms, one who refuses to grow and one who refuses to stop growing. The narcissist doesn't learn a lesson in the way we'd like them to. They don't have a sudden epiphany and become self-aware. Most likely, they move on to find another source, another empath with boundaries that haven't been fortified yet. And that's not the empath's responsibility. That's not the empath's story to write. The empath's story is simpler and more profound. They chose themselves. They decided their peace mattered more than someone else's chaos. They learned that love without respect is just emotional labor in disguise. And they walked away, not in anger, but in alignment. Not to punish anyone, but to protect themselves. That moment of detachment, that quiet, conscious choice to stop absorbing someone else's emotional poison, wasn't the end of their capacity to love. It was the beginning of their capacity to love correctly, starting with themselves. Because the greatest spiritual truth the empath learns is this: you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, and the moment you stop tolerating chaos, you stop attracting it. The narcissist's power didn't end because the empath destroyed it. It ended because the empath simply stopped giving it fuel. They stopped playing the game. They stopped speaking the language. They stopped participating in the delusion that love requires suffering. And in that space, that quiet, sacred space of conscious detachment, the empath finally discovered what they'd been searching for all along. Not in another person, not in fixing what's broken, not in being needed, but in being whole.